Welcome to SUAANGAN. I'm your host, Janine Blake. On today's program, we bring you a beneficiary profile of Inuvik bootleg MLA Floyd Roland. Floyd Kenny Roland was elected as the member of the 13th Legislative Assembly for the Inuvik riding on October 16, 1995. Inuvik is his home. He was born and raised here. His parents are David and Olga Roland.
I was born here in Inuvik, at that time Inuvik General Hospital, 1961. I was adopted 5 days after that and brought to Reindeer Station where my parents were living at the time. And my dad, David, didn't even know what was happening until he went down to the river to pick up my mom from the Bombardier, and she came off with a bundle and there I was. So that was the start of things, I guess, and then we moved here to Inuvik. I think it is around 63, and since then been living here, and families here, and married here, and have my children here as well.
Floyd attended high school at Samuel Hearn Secondary School in Inuvik. He later went on to study auto mechanics at the Southern Alberta Institute of Technology in Calgary and the Northern Alberta Institute of Technology in Edmonton.
I guess I look at a few people I grew up with and went through school. Back then there was a lot of continuity, I guess. I can remember a lot of the students I went to school with from probably grade 3 right through till about grade 8 or 9 before some people started having to leave. One of the fellows that I was a good friend with, he lived up on Co-op Hill as well. His dad used to ref in hockey. Gordon Elliott. My neighbors and relatives as well. We're all close family friends. Guys I grew up with, Peter Smith, Dennis Allen on the hill, sort of thing. A lot of the good old boys, I guess you would say, just lived and stayed around town, and a few have moved off and seen things a little in the brighter lights, I guess, and some have come back even. My early days of watching people work was my dad. Unfortunately, we had outboard motors and things that weren't all that reliable, so we did things like work on the outboard sometimes in the living room. We'd get all packed up and everything in the canoe to go out to the coast after school was out, and we'd start making our journey towards the coast. Back then, it took us 2 days to get where today it takes 3 hours, say. So we'd load things up in a boat and we'd push off the shore, and the old 40-horse Johnson would start cranking away on that thing to try to get it going, and sometimes it wouldn't go. We'd drift down to the old in-town airport, paddle to shore, and have to take it ashore and do some cleaning of the carbs or something. And one time I remember we had to take the motor back off, put it in the back of the truck, up to the house, and I think it was something in the foot we actually took apart that night, put it back together, back down to the river, and that night we were off. So I remember days like that. I guess it was the first I got my hands into it, helping my dad. And I got involved in mechanics, always sort of kept hands-on and liked tinkering with things. And I took advantage of an apprenticeship that came open with the Government of Northwest Territories in 1981 and started that and finished my apprenticeship in 1984. And went to work in the private sector for about 1.5 years, and then went back with the government after that. And altogether about 14 years in the trade before getting involved in politics, I guess, as one would say.
We asked Floyd why he decided to become involved in local politics.
Well, actually it was sort of a twist in things, I guess. Maybe it was meant to be. I wanted to get into tourism. Still had my regular work, and my dad, most of his life, he worked at the school, retired there, but throughout his life was always, he took his pride in hunting and trapping as well, and being able to go out on the land and bring food home and take care of us that way. And bring us out there as well and show us how things get done out there. And I always thought it would be nice to be able to share that with people. And then when I helped out Elijah Allen one summer, I had a new boat up here, and he had a big crew to take out to Kendall Island, and he knew I had this pretty good boat, so he asked me to fill in to help him out with one trip, and I ended up helping him out with a couple of trips, and people started saying, well, why don't you get more involved? So I put a proposal together for me and my dad, a family-run operation, and the first one got turned down, and I sort of knew it would be a difficult one because of it was to do with the whaling area, and there was a lot of concern with what might happen and impacts of more people coming out to whaling camps and that. So we sort of expected that, and we got denied, and so I thought, okay, plan B, we'll use his Delta camp, and it's already established. We won't be going into any place new, and then look at doing some fishing out of Yaya Lakes, and thought that was for sure. That was I figured it would be a guaranteed, and actually got turned down again. And at that point, I started asking questions. Why did I get turned down? And who's making decisions on, and what are they basing their decisions on? So I started going to community court meetings, because I figured that was at that level I should start checking out why things were going as they were.
Floyd's first foray into politics was not very successful. He decided to run for a director's position on the board of the Inuvik Community Corporation.
Their elections came up, and a person who was working there had seen me showing up at a number of meetings and said, you know, you seem to have an interest, why don't you take a run at this? And initially I thought, well, I mean, geez, I was happy to get my paycheck, pay my rent, you know, pay my mortgage, my taxes and so on, and I was happy doing that. But I thought, okay, well, let's give it a shot. There was nine running for 3 seats, I think it was, and I came in 9th, so my first kick at the can wasn't a very promising result. And
he didn't stop there, though. He was later elected to several boards and councils in Inuvik.
Hunters and Trappers is having elections here. You should go. You know, we should take a run at it. And I said, well, I'm not. My first one there wasn't too good. I don't know if I want to come in last again, sort of thing. And they said, well, no, look at it. Think about your dad, your brother. They're hunters and trappers, and they get out there. You've gone out lots, and you know the land. You know what people are talking about. So why don't you take a run at it? And so I did, and I was elected, and I served 2 terms on Hunters and Trappers. And after that, it seemed every time I went to a meeting on something, they said, well, geez, why don't you put your name in? I was on the board of Hunters and Trappers for the first term, and became deputy or vice chair the second year, and I ended up serving as chairman for 1 term. And in that time as well, I got involved in the Western Arctic Trade, WATA as we call it, Western Arctic Tourism Association. And at that time, as an interim, we put in an interim executive, and I ended up being president of that for 6 months till we got everybody back together. And they wanted me to stick on for another year, and I told them I couldn't at that point. I just had too much, because another thing that had come up was a town council. Somebody had asked me to take a run at it, and I was elected in the town council my first term as a councillor. Second term, I got in as deputy mayor. So it started. I guess I look at it. My beginnings were all community based, and that's where it started.
When SUAANGAN returns after these messages, we'll bring you more on our beneficiary profile with the Inuvik Boot Lake MLA Floyd Roland. We're back with our profile of the Inuvik Boot Lake MLA, Floyd Roland. What made you decide to make the change from local politics to territorial?
Well, it was interesting, actually. I had one of the last trips I did on a tourism thing. It was the last trip. It was a busy year, and it was the last trip. It was September, fall weather. I took a newly married couple out that knew me from my brother-in-law's ex-wife in Whitehorse, and they sent them up to me, and I took them out for an overnight. Their honeymoon was out there fishing and stuff, and the fellow started asking me questions about what I was involved with. So I told him what I was involved with, and he said, what's the next step? And I looked, I was deputy mayor at that time. I said, well, I guess the next step would be mayor. I can go up to be mayor. And then I said, well, there's another step, and it's territorial government. That's the legislative assembly. And he told me, you know, that's the thing you should be going for. And I looked at him, I mean, I met this guy for a day and a half, and I don't think so. You know, I had no interest in going beyond where I was working at. It seemed that was definitely more involved than I ever thought I would be, and the issues you deal with are definitely more involved than I think a lot of people have an idea of. So I At that time, I said no, and it was almost a year to date of the next election. And then throughout that year, I had people coming to me in the winter and saying, you know, Floyd, have you ever thought about this? You know, your name's come up a couple of times, and I said, no, I'm not. I've never really given it any thought. And as the election time got sooner, people in the community, as I talked to different people in the meetings I was at and just downtown and throughout work, people were starting to say, you know, somebody's got to run. Somebody's got to take a run here. And I started thinking about it and thought, well, why not?
Oh, Floyd Roland, I think he's going to be an asset to this area. He's young, he's energetic, he's got lots to offer. I think his head and his heart is in the right place. He's going to represent the people really well.
This evening we're talking with Floyd Roland, the new MLA of Inuvik.
What was it like, just as a person, going into the ledge the first time? What were you thinking?
Well, the first time, I couldn't believe the photo they had of me. They found an old photo. I tell you, it made me look like a real rough fellow coming out of the north. The person picking me up from the airport, I don't think they recognized. They were looking for somebody with big beard, long hair, real rough-looking type character. I'd had my hair cut and clean shaved, come off the airport with my to the airport in Yellowknife, come off the plane with my wife, and they had to take a good look. And I guess part of it was for me was it was a time of a lot of challenge and trying to, as a person, make sure that I was doing the best I could with the information I had to make right decisions and have good input. I've always tended to try and take things in first before stepping out so much and firing away with words, sort of thing. I took in a lot, and I watched how other people operated, and some of the more, I guess, seasoned members or veterans, as one would say, and went from that perspective. And I thought, you know, that's the way to do it, and it seems to have worked for me to that degree. Well, you can compromise. I see it. You know, things that you look at, you can compromise on things, and there's things that, you know, as a person, I can't compromise on as I see it. And if I do, that makes me less of who I am as I see it. I remember one member telling me, he said, Floyd, he said, it's going to happen to you too. And I looked at him, and I said, what do you mean? He said, you're going to grow a thick skin as well. He says, that happens to us. He says, after a while, whether you will like it or not, you're going to develop a thick skin. He said, well, things are going to happen here, and people are going to say things. They're not going to tell you all the stuff or whatever. You're going to try to work for people, and some people will come to you and put all the cards on the table, and some people will only give you a little bit, and you'll go out and try to do your best, and then somebody will point out that you're on the wrong, you know, you're just on the wrong path because you don't have all the information. You find out, once you start looking into it, more information, that you realize you were on the wrong sort of to begin with, that there was some of the information that you should have had to begin with wasn't there. And I mean, I've made a point of going back to people and telling them when they come to my office again, I say, well, you know, the situation you told me about, it wasn't all accurate. We missed some pieces, and then I put it on. This is what I've told, you know, and unfortunately, to a certain degree, we couldn't help. Otherwise, people might come back with more information, and we try to help out in that way. But it happens in the assembly, it happens in the community to a certain degree, so you just have to be careful.
Despite the challenges of the 13th Assembly, Floyd decided to run for the 14th. Because of an Electoral Boundaries Commission, there were now 2 ridings in the town of Inuvik. The 2 new ridings were called the Inuvik Twin Lakes riding and the Inuvik Boot Lake riding. Floyd and his family live in the Boot Lake riding, so he decided that he would run there. He won the election easily, and Roland was elected as the first member of the Legislative Assembly for the Inuvik Boot Lake riding on December 6, 1999.
I think that our campaign team did a really good job in getting our information out to the people. Worked with a good team to develop our information and presentation of it.
How is the 14th Assembly different from the 13th?
It's challenging in its own ways. I found it. Number one, I was approached by some of the members and many constituents saying, Floyd, it's time. You know, we've seen you in your first term. I finished my 13th Assembly off as a minister for Health and Social Services as well as a Housing Corp, and I did serve as Deputy Premier. And I think from that experience, even though short, I had some people that had confidence that I could take on that challenge. So I started off with the 14th Assembly, taking a run at the top job, so to speak, as the Premier of Northwest Territories. and hoping that at the end of the day that I might be able to grab a cabinet seat as well through that process. That wasn't my goal of running initially, but as we went from election and being confirmed re-elected and into the House and meeting some of the new members and the feedback, politics being politics, you know, people wanted somebody to take to run at it as well, and thought that might be the time. Obviously wasn't, and maybe it was meant to be, but I found out that, you know, the political education somebody told me I would get in the 13th Assembly, well, I guess this term I can say I really got the nasty side, the negative side of what politics can be in that sense. You know, it's not all bad, but it was a tough curve on that aspect to go with it. And I found that in the 14th Assembly, the cooperative working atmosphere just didn't seem to be there as it was in the 13th Assembly.
MLA Floyd Roland has a reputation of being easygoing and approachable with his constituents. He hosts constituency meetings, an open house at his constituency office called Floyd's on Fridays, and welcomes everyone to his office to talk about the issues, their concerns, or just to give updates on what's happening at the Ledge. We asked him how his constituents can assist him with his job as an MLA.
It's difficult to feel the pulse of the community, as they say, if people don't come and say how they feel. You know, even from my own experience before I got in this, when something would happen, we'd all have comments. You know, you'd hear it on the news or something, and you'd say your remarks to your co-workers and stuff, and then that's be the end of it. After coffee break or a couple of times you talked with somebody, it would sort of just go on to the next issue. Myself as a member, I need that kind of input. I need to know how people are feeling about their government. You know, as difficult as the times and the comments you get back about government overall in general, and then never mind when we've made big mistakes or anything, I think I need and can use the feedback I have from people in the community, whether it's walking down the road, whether it's when I'm taking my son to minor hockey for his games and I'm standing in the stands and a parent comes to me and raises an issue, or just, you know, just gives me something that he's been feeling about the community. That gives me an idea of what our community is feeling and what sort of what's happening, and, you know, what's the issue of the community. And I mean, those things are important. A member can only represent their community by knowing what their community is up to. And there are times when I've had a constituency meeting and I've had very few people out. And I remember at the tail end of the 13th Assembly, I was getting worried. You know, people so mad with me that they're not coming to meetings anymore, that they're just going to bounce me out. Thankfully, it was the other way. Things were going fairly well in the community. The business end was starting to look up. People were getting work. And that's been much the way it has been to date as a member here in Inuvik. And so you're challenged to sort of make sure that you're covering the bases and bringing the issues back and raising them, getting the letters to ministers. And a lot of times, a lot of people, what they see is a session, and they think that's the only avenue we're dealing with it. Well, when they come to me, when I'm here at the office and have an issue, well, with media today, I can get on the computer, and technology today, I can get on the computer and send an email to the minister saying, I have a concern. I have been approached by a contractor or a constituent on income support or a government tender or something, and I'd like more information. And I get responses back, and again, same time, sometimes I don't get a very, I guess, well-timed response or things, but I still get that information back to them.
Hello, I'm Shirley Esau, the ICS board member from Sac Harbor. And your question of the week is, what is the name of the riding that the MLA Floyd Roland represents?
When SUAANGAN returns after these messages, we'll bring you more on our beneficiary profile with the Inuvik Bootleg MLA Floyd Roland. We're back with our profile of the Inuvik Bootleg MLA Floyd Roland. Travel, being away from home, debates, issues, controversial votes. Being an MLA can be very stressful. We asked Floyd how he unwinds and relaxes.
Well, it is difficult because you can't, what I found 13th Assembly even to now is wherever you go, there's a feeling of responsibility in a sense when somebody comes to talk to you that you've got your job hat on, and that's what it is. I mean, if you get a call at home, I got a call this weekend about an issue dealing with healthcare, territorial healthcare, and you know, you sort of wish, well, I could probably better address this from the office because I'd have more resources there. Or knowing that you can't make any calls to anybody else on the weekend anyway to try to get information, it's pretty difficult. But you know, when people come to you and raise those issues, you try to deal with them at that time. And thankfully for me, having my home here, when I go home, I've been able to pretty good just sort of get home and do family stuff, or just unwind, you know, sit back in my big armchair and have a Coca-Cola sort of thing, and sit back and watch a program with the kids, or you know, take my kid to hockey, and then I still try to play a bit of hockey myself. And try to get out and just do the things I used to do, and even you know, by playing with the old timers hockey crew, you still get comments out on the ice about politics. So you know, I expect it now. I guess it's part of it. It's part of life, and just that I try not to take things personally. I don't see that as being very productive anyway. You know, if you take things on too personally, it can weigh you down. And I must admit, this time around, I have to admit it's been much more negative than I would like it to, but at the same time, it's amazing how many people would like people to challenge their government to make sure it's doing things the best it can be doing and in their interest.
We asked Floyd to give his advice to aspiring politicians.
Well, I guess I would say is when you start to work, as you feel in any environment, whether it's community, territorial, municipal, is to try to understand your community and the people the best you can. Be open to what people say, you know, and if somebody comes to you, as you questioned earlier about, you know, being irate and agitated or whatever, is not to take that as a personal thing. Is just work with what you have and try to understand your constituents and use the resources around you, and never be afraid to ask the questions. That's one thing I found. I remember somebody telling me a long time ago, I said, no question is a stupid question. Is always ask. If you don't understand, ask. And hey, there might be times you're called upon to stand up and stand alone. And I would say, you know, don't be afraid to do that. It's something that can only win you respect amongst your own peers.
That was our program for this week. Thank you for watching SUAANGAN. I'm your host, Janine Blake, and I'll see you next week.